Welcome to the great conversation where ideas matter. Ideas can not only shape markets, they can change the world. I've been fascinated for quite some time over what an executive said to me was a living threat assessment. Now, for those of you who've listened to me, I've been focused for quite some time, being an ex-Six Sigma guy, on the fact that I haven't run into many security professionals or business professionals who actually have real time. The goal of real time isn't necessarily in their bandwidth. They think it's impossible. They think it's not measurable. They think it's too expensive. This idea of real time, especially when it comes to situational awareness and actionable response, is quite an elusive thing in the security world. So when I heard the term living from Fred Burton, who is part of Ontech, and an ex-security professional and a great author in the security landscape. When I heard living, I was fascinated with that. And we had a great discussion about his background. But then I saw a press release in 2021 regarding the 2020 pandemic year. How many companies actually have grown their revenue by 177% in 2020? It sounds just unbelievable. But if you have the right product at the right time, meeting the right need, things can happen. So I got on the phone with Lukas Quanstrom from Ontech. He's the CEO and co-founder. And Lukas, we're going to kind of learn a little bit about you, but also about why this is so timely right now, this living threat assessment intelligence platform.
Ron, I'm excited to have the great conversation with you, and thanks so much for having me on.
First, let's do a quick background. Lukas, you didn't come from the risk resilient security industry.
I certainly did not. My background was all in marketing and MarTech. I grew up helping large companies solve go-to-market problems and ended up in a space where I was using emerging technology to do that. So this is, as an iPhone is coming to market, as Facebook comes to market, and Twitter, you have all this emerging technology, emerging software that's in place, and mostly for consumers. And so my job was to help companies understand how to leverage these emerging mediums in order to communicate with their prospects, with their customers, in order to drive business outcomes. So very outcome focused, very to the point of how do I leverage technology, so much so that I then said, hey, why am I in this marketing agency world, no offense to marketing agency world, where I'm hourly churn and burn of time, pitching, not winning clients. And for those of you in that space, it can be a grueling business. And so I said, well, I'll go to a different grueling business, which is startup and tech startup world, especially because I could be closer to the product, closer to technology. And so that's how I transitioned maybe the first time from a marketer to then technologist in the first go. And I'm sure we'll explore even further than the next transition after that.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. So your first introduction to being an entrepreneur was with a technology company, but still not necessarily in the risk resilient security industry. So when you met your other co-founder, what was that conversation like? What was going on in his head?
It's interesting because Tom and I knew each other really just as friends in Chicago. So our wives knew each other. Tom and I knew each other. We didn't exactly know what we did professionally. It didn't quite matter. And we were just friends. I had some semblance of an idea. Well, then, 4 or 5 years later, he moves to a new city, moves to Austin. I get asked to go move to Austin to support an acquisition with the company I was at the time. And in doing so, we reconnect. And then we spend more time understanding what each other is actually up to. And Tom has got his business. He's in the investigative intelligence space, and he's helping high net worth individuals with, potential threats to themselves, to their families. And and I'm in the social marketing software business, helping large companies understand their customers, listen through social media, then advertise to them, et cetera, et cetera. And so Tom was the one who actually came with we like to say the tradecraft experience and knowing, hey, I have a problem that needs solved. And I kind of have an idea that I think I could use technology better to help scale my work and help me be more efficient. And especially as it relates to, maybe some of the new things I can do listening for threats in those social mediums, that open web. And to me, that looked like a pretty familiar problem, because what we were doing at, the company I was at the time was we were taking a bunch of different structured data, whether it was from Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or forums or blogs, and structuring it in a single platform for a variety of teams to use that data to accomplish their particular job, whether it's customer service or advertising. And so it was that intersection of, Tom's tradecraft desires, but then my understanding of how to actually structure this in a software enabled business and actually go to market with that. That was that kind of founding intersection.
Well, so what year was that again?
This is 4 years ago.
Okay,
so
4 years ago. So you're already aware that it's a sensor-driven world. There's a lot of devices out there that are aggregating data, but it's, like you said, it's unstructured. And so Tom is coming to you and saying, I have a similar problem. In the security space, there's a lot of data out there, but we don't necessarily know how to get to it on a timely basis and assemble it in something that's consumable and understandable to whoever we're serving, including ourselves. Do I have it right?
That's accurate.
That's fantastic. Now, it's one thing to have an idea around a marketplace and around a fireplace, maybe over a cup of coffee between friends. It's another thing to actually assemble it in an understandable and practical business model that is consumable to investors to launch a company. So tell me, now that you've gone from the recognition of a need, how did you structure it then to sell it to the investors so you could start a company?
Part of my upbringing really centered around a desire to build things, to start things, to run things. This happened in a variety of ways, even if as a musician, and starting something and creating something in music, something I had done. So there was always that desire within me to build and to start and to run. And it just took leveraging, past experiences that I had been fortunate to have, right? Whether it was education and, oftentimes, why did I get that MBA? And then you hearken back to little things you learned in the MBA, or, how did I end up at this company when I was early stage employee? But then when you're in a fast growing startup that goes from 20 to 1,000 people in a couple of years, the acceleration on learning that occurs is just phenomenal. So I've been very fortunate. And it took too just some risk on our part and some leaning over our skis and not being afraid to say, hey, we're going to lean over the skis and we're just going to go for it. And that took a few very smart actions along the way. Understanding, great idea. Is there a market? How big is that market? Who is in that market? And so luckily, Tom had access to people that we could go talk to and say, would you even be interested in this? Right. And so you just start taking those baby steps and learning what's the potential here. And then you have to be able to communicate that potential to potential investors as well and help shape up. Look, here is the plan. Here's how we go to market. Here's what the market is. Here's what we're going to do. And all the various components of starting the business. It's just decision after decision.
Absolutely. It's kind of like a flywheel.
Absolutely. And it's funny you say that, Ron. Our company theme for this year, we're in our fiscal year 22, is momentum, and it's inch by inch flywheel. These days, you don't know what is going to happen next every week. Last week we were frozen in with no power and water here in Austin. So you never know what's going to happen, even in the midst of a pandemic. And so it's not about a silver bullet and about, oh, we just find that magic thing and then we take off. It's day by day, and it's just grind, and it's just, you keep moving. And so that's early days. That's today too. It's just, how do you keep moving, every day?
Well, some of the more successful companies that I've encountered over my career start with that flywheel concept, right? We know what the opportunity is. Now, what are the various steps we need to take to gain momentum and reach to make sure our initial concept becomes something that goes mainstream. So, and then that flywheel almost becomes the coda, almost becomes the script for every decision that's made from then on. That is, right, each step. So right now today, from 4 years ago, Lukas, what did you discover over the last 4 years that you said, boy, we were right 4 years ago? What incredible visionaries. We just nailed it. And what did you discover? Uh-oh, we have to adjust. This isn't necessarily the right way to go. What were those things, if you're willing to share that?
I certainly am. And there's absolutely so many of them. Let me pick a couple. I think key to the process of starting a company is not holding on to anything too tightly. I think, Ron, you've had experience starting many things, and things pivot, right? It's a dynamic world we're in. And so if we hold too tightly to an idea that we have, right, we can't have that selfish control and expect for, hey, it's going to go exactly as we think. So we have to hold things a little loose. And in doing that, you are constantly listening and learning. And I really like, the concept of being able to change your mind, right? Some might say, oh, well, yeah, that person, yeah, they were wrong. Great, I was wrong. I got new data, right? I learned something, and I'm happy to be wrong and change my mind. And we need to do X now in light of that. So I'll share one that comes to mind, a couple more perhaps. I'll go backwards. The most recent was, we had one of the quote unquote bets we placed in the company was that the K through 12 market was an area that could be serviced with the product we were building. It absolutely is. And it's being used successfully, in many schools. That said, we had a pandemic hit, and schools had to figure out, how do I feed kids that relied on school lunches? How do I get them devices? How do I do remote learning? And their capacity to deal with almost anything else except the core basics they needed to accomplish was just extremely diminished. So we said, look, this isn't a good time to continue down the path of, let's force selling into this vertical right now. We said, nope, we're just going to put it on ice. It doesn't mean we don't continue to have the product there. We don't continue to support those that are using it. It just means, do I really keep hiring all of the individuals required to go to market in that vertical and expand? Not right now. We're going to focus somewhere else. That's one example of having to kind of pivot. But even early on, in earlier days of Ontech, we started out focused on executive protection as a use case. That was, Tom's comfort area in many ways, where he had a lot of experience, very obvious need, great use case for our product today. However, if we're building a large enterprise that venture capital is going to put a lot of funding behind, the addressable market for an executive protection use case alone just simply isn't there. And so it's not enough to do executive protection. We have to also help companies in ABC areas of their business, which we do, right? Insider threat, corporate security. And so that is just an example of not holding on too tightly to say, no, we're executive protection, that's what we do. No, we have to constantly keep looking for ways to continue to serve our customers and our clients based on the needs that they have. And so just a few examples of slight pivots or decisions we've had to make along the way. There's probably hundreds that we've made, and dozens I've forgotten about already at this point.
Well, I love the fact that Tom had the EP background. Some of the consulting companies in that space depend entirely on who you know anywhere in the world, right? As well as, of course, their innate sense of the risk assessment in and around the personality they're trying to protect. So it's not a huge leap to go from personality to entity. to go from the CEO of a company to a large organization where you still have the same challenges, the right? And
Correct.
so when who coined the term protective intelligence? Who coined that?
I'm going to give credit to Fred Burton. I don't think that's true at all. I don't know who coined the term protective intelligence. I will tell you, I do know he's very frustrated that Tom and I were the ones to grab protectiveintelligence.com instead of himself when we did. Even before we had started Ontic, we had that in place officially. So, Fred always thought he should own that. But protective intelligence, those two words are very important to Ontic because what we're doing isn't even just building our platform and our company, it's building a category and helping educate and provide thought leadership and helping companies understand how important the practice of protective intelligence is. And so that's those two words are definitely near and dear to our company's heart and our mission.
Well, it's fascinating to me. Again, let's go back to the pandemic for a second and your record year, your 177% growth. What are people protecting in 2020 that suddenly has fueled this platform, the need for this platform? What are they protecting?
In many ways, they're protecting the same thing they always have, which is their most important asset, which is their people. And a lot of companies do that. A lot of things protect people. What I think is not a surprise is the landscape in which we are in today. There's a lot going on, right? Whether it's Capitol riots that we see, whether it's employment and a lot of frustration in terms of the political landscape or the pandemic stressors that brings. We have racial tension as well. There's a lot of frustration that's occurring, and there's a lot of mediums that are present to allow that frustration to spin and grow and manifest on itself, and even that to flywheel in an unfortunate way. And so what they're protecting today is even the same level of importance as before, but what's happening is how you protect. Just like everything in life, it's dynamic, it changes. You can't do the same thing you've always done. And so we have to do it differently today. And so that's where protective intelligence as a proactive way to actively manage threats is so important in this landscape where the volume is such that unless you do so, it's just going to be impossible to keep up.
There's a lot of people tapping into social media and other public forums to get information out. And the justification of that is, somewhere in that haystack are a number of needles that'll make sense to us on emerging threats. So there's a lot of that going on today. What makes protective intelligence, though, a unique approach to that public and private information?
The protective intelligence approach of investigating and analyzing and having a process to do that proactively where you're going through and identifying threats, right? Then you're assessing, and then how do you put measures in place to mitigate those threats to protectees? That concept has definitely been around for a while now. But today what we're seeing is just the volume of data that exists. You mentioned social media. That's one of those areas where you might identify a threat, but then you have to assess that threat, right? Is someone saying, I hate this company, and it's a frustrated, 13-year-old kid, maybe, or is someone saying, I hate this company, and it's someone who has violent offenses and used to work for the company and has access to information about the company? The assessment on those two situations are very different. But social is just one of the areas in which we might identify potential threats to a protectee. There's many sources.
Something just dawned on me. Let me tell everybody a quick story. I was at the beginning of computer-aided design and manufacturing, and it was quite a high concept sale at the time because you had to go into the VP of engineering, who had a bunch of guys with big drafting boards, and he goes, "You're really gonna replace each one of those drafting boards with $100,000 computer. It just doesn't make sense. So it was a high concept, but here's what's really interesting. We weren't making the drawings quicker. What we were doing is capturing the subject matter expertise of the engineers they had on staff. Mm-hmm. So what you've done is you've taken the Toms, your co-founder, the Fred Burtons, how they think about risk and the process by which they synthesize that understanding and activate it toward a given action, either proactively or in response to an incident. You've captured that? Is that what you've done in your platform?
I think it's even more than the Toms or the Freds. It's the professionals today in the seat working at any number of corporations out there today, and their expertise and their training and their knowledge, but having something that helps them be more successful in that job. So giving them a place in which they can actually manage the volume they need to manage. They can be more efficient. They can get more insight than they would get without technology, just like technology helps us in many ways of our lives that we would never have even imagined today. And so while there's definitely tradecraft expertise from Fred, from Tom, from lots of individuals, from our clients today who give feedback into, hey, I really would love to see, X feature and help me be more productive, as an example. But it's about enabling those humans to leverage technology to be more successful. It's not about even removing them from the equation. They're still so key because they bring a lot of context and decision-making to a lot of the data and fact patterns that we present to them.
Yeah, I didn't ask that question with the implication we get rid of engineers. If you notice, when we introduced CAD/CAM back in the 70s, it didn't get rid of engineers,
right?
But it gave them a scale.
Absolutely.
It gave them scale, reach. It gave them, it was like giving a booster shot to their brains too, because they could do things they otherwise couldn't have done before. So, and that's what I'm hearing. You've got a learning platform, not just a protective intelligence platform, but a learning platform too. That is, every step they take within the platform kind of captures how they think and how they distill information and makes it better through the platform.
The drafting board engineers is a perfect parallel. Spot on, Ron. Correct.
What's next for Ontech? I'm not fond of taking 1 year results and saying we've got a new trend, but it's still remarkable. What's next for Ontech? What do you believe in 2021, 2022? What's the market saying to you, and how do you think you'll be responding?
Our mission, Ron, is that we exist to serve intelligence to those who protect. We do so through a software medium so that they can do their job to keep people and assets safe, to prevent risk to business continuity, right? So businesses can be successful because they've kept their people safe. For Ontech, what's next is we need to, in order to accomplish that mission, businesses must have Ontech to do that job more successfully, right? And so Our job is to help demonstrate the value proposition of what we do to more companies, to deliver on the promise of the product market fit that we've said we have with these clients, and so that they can see the results and to continue expansion, right? It'll be impossible for us to achieve our mission unless companies are using Ontech to actually help keep their people safe. And so that's why we are doing things like we do with enabling the company on raising funding to hire more people, to go help us tell stories better, to go help enable clients more successfully, to build more product, to improve existing products. And so it's more growth. And growth is fun and growth is challenging, right? And so we have a lot of work to do. As you push that flywheel, it can be pretty heavy at times, but you still keep moving.
One of the things I've always said that makes a successful company is they ask the right questions. If I asked you to put me in touch with a business leader or a risk leader and that you know of, that asked the right questions before they got into business with you, they asked the right questions. First of all, what would be those questions be? They were asking the right questions and they decided to start partnering with you. What were the questions that you and they asked each other, both of you, that led to a decision to deploy a platform like this with a sense of urgency?
Mm-hmm. Some of the questions that we would ask would be, how are you doing it today? And how well is that working? If you think about an ROI, it's very kind of simple, right? And I don't mean to oversimplify it, but you can either, right, increase revenue, you can decrease costs, you can reduce risk, or you can improve experience. And that's kind of it as far as I'm concerned. Well, we don't necessarily say, well, we don't drive net new revenue, right, necessarily, right? If you spend X on advertising, you'll get this return in terms of sales, right? That's not the business we're in. We definitely can help reduce costs, but primarily we reduce risk. And so the individuals that are tasked with doing this at a company, their risk landscape is extremely broad, right? You're placing bets. You don't have the ability to see the future and see where risk is going to come from. So you need to do the work of putting in the right process, the right structure to, as much as you can, be aware of, mitigate, prevent, and then manage the things that do manifest, because it's going to happen anyway. And so we want to understand that so that we could then say, okay, great. In light of XYZ problem, we actually can help you with X, not with Y and Z. And I think that's important too, to say we don't do, because we'll get asked many times, hey, well, could you solve this problem? And today that might not be a problem that we'll solve. And it's important to not try to be everything to everyone. Then on the flip side, the questions I think we often get, it depends on the stage, but when you're year one or year zero of a company, it's, well, prove to me that you have the ability to do this. Like, can you actually deliver on the promise, Ontech, right? Can you do that? And there we have to rely on, look, we know we're year zero of the company, but you don't have to take just Ontech's word for it. Look at the people here and the other work we have done at previous businesses that demonstrate there's a lot of parallels and we can bring this to light. And look at the experience that we have in terms of tradecraft, et cetera. So we get that question early on. We don't get that question anymore. Now we get questions on, I would say, okay, cool, you can help me with ABC, but can you also help me with D, E, and F? And if they're aligned with what we want to do, then great, yes, let's go solve more problems together. Those are the most fun questions, which is pushing us to continue to innovate, to develop and build new products to help accomplish the mission that we're on.
It's so interesting, because if you are going to hinge your future on that type of thought process, that means you have to be prepared, and many companies in our industry aren't prepared for this, for a rapid application development process, right? The ability to convince your customers to do a quick iteration on what they need,
Yep.
knowing it may not work completely right the first time. Rapid application development has been used with many of the big technology platforms outside the security space. Do you see that more and more happening in the security space?
If they're working with Ontech, they're going to see it. Whether it's happening other people or not, I don't know. But if you have Ontech, you're going to see it. And it's going to introduce some pain at times, right?
Right.
Put the envelope. And we're going to release features and product, and oh, shoot, someone moved my cheese. The button's not where it used to be on the product. And that's going to happen. But I think if the intent is communicated clearly and you have agreement in terms of Ontech has my best interest as a client in they're building this so that I can continue to innovate myself, right? Then there's acceptance with that pain. Like, I get it. I just have a little bit of learning curve, but you built this new thing and I'm going to love it once I get the hang of it. But, the newness is a little bit maybe jarring at first, and then the speed at which we introduce newness as well. But I think what's important too is in that relationship between our clients and Ontech, that we believe the same thing, that we believe together that the outcome is attainable. And it's that common belief, I think, that gives you a lot of room for error together, for developing quickly and learning quickly. And so that gives you a lot of freedom and trust when you believe the same thing.
That is an outstanding point. And that is back to my original premise. If we believe that we need to get to real-time intelligence, real-time actionable response, if we both believe in that, we'll both work to get there. Customer, consultant, technology partner, but it's having that belief that that's important for the safety and security of your people. So great point. Lukas Quanstrom, this has been a great conversation. Who should we invite to the table for another conversation? Anybody you have in mind?
One of the most gracious individuals that I have the pleasure of talking to from time to time, and he gives great feedback in terms of what's working, the landscape he's in, is a gentleman by the name of Brian Murphy, who right now happens to be the chief security officer of Walmart. And he's just always so kind to share his perspective on what he's seeing in the world. And he sees a lot, right, in his position. And so he's been a great friend and real privilege to get to know Brian.
Okay, well, we'll certainly reach out to Brian. Lukas, this has been a great conversation. I really have enjoyed your ability to listen intently to your co-founder and the market, to be able to formulate a value proposition and an operational construct that promises to bring innovation and change to this industry in many, many ways. So best of luck with you.
Thank you so much, Ron. It was my pleasure. Great to chat.